spoken by the prophets, one of the prophets, when it says, and there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, Isai, and a branch shall grow out of his roots. Now, if you look at the Hebrew, you will find that the word for branch is netzer, Orit. If you look at Nazarite, it's NAZIRITE, right? So we have a T and a Z sound and a T sound. But that T sound is not so common to English. Usually they would transliterate it as TS, as a TS sort of a sound, We're going to have to expand on this particular reasoning because there's a little bit more, and this is basic. This is just a basic teaching on this. It's not even going into the detail, but get the basics, not to confuse the two words. And many of us have confused the two words because we've been reading King James Bible. You understand? I mean, only, and not really doing any research on, well, what were they looking at when they translate it like this? You know, we get stuck in English. We get lost in mistranslation. That's what happens. When you go to the Strong's Concordance, the H5342, you find the key word, netzer, and netzer, it's a masculine noun. It's from the H5341 root in the sense of greenness as a striking color. Green. This is why when we say green is up on top, especially with the Ethiopian flag, the Sendek Alama, that the green is up on top. Some Negroes, Rasta Negroes, say, no, the red is up on top. All right, if that's your choice. You understand? You're turning things upside down. You understand? But really, the green is up on top. This is another proof of the color green being up on top, and even Keddus Georgis. But that's going a little bit ahead of ourselves. But the biblical outline of this word means a sprout, a shoot, a branch, and it's almost always used in a figurative sense. And some of the other places in Scripture where it's used, and you can look this up for yourself, or at least look up the verses, there's at least three other places where it's used. It's used first time in 11:1, and there shall come forth a rod out of the stem of Jesse, and a branch, a netzer, shall grow out of his roots. Then in 14 and 19, but thou art cast out of thy grave like an abominable branch. It's used there as well. And as the raiment of those that are slain, thrust through for sword, that go down to the stones of the pit, as a carcass trodden under feet. Now people say, well, that can't be one of the places. Okay, let's just put a question mark there. Isaiah 60:21 says, thy people also shall be all righteous. They shall inherit the land forever. The branch of my planting, the netzer of my planting, the work of my hands, that I may be glorified. I think most of the folks like that one a little bit better than the last one from Isaiah. And then in Daniel 11:7, it says, but out of a branch of her roots shall one stand up in his estate, which shall come with an army, and shall enter into the fortress of the king of the north, and shall deal against him, and shall prevail. That has a lot of messianic tendencies, especially to that particular verse right there. But let's go to the root, the H5341. Some say natsar. Here's the primitive root. The primitive root word, the Strong's Concordance H5341, natsar, N-A-T-S-A-R, they spell it. It means, biblical outline, biblical usage, to guard, to watch, watch over, to keep, to watch, to guard, to keep, to preserve, to guard from dangers, to keep, to observe, to guard with fidelity, to guard, to keep secret, to be kept close, to be blockaded, while we had to block some of these nigger Jews. You understand? These extremist so-called black Hebrew Israelites, haters of Haile Selassie, haters of our kinsman redeemer, haters of Christ and his kingly character, had to blockade them. That's what Nazareth, Nazareth signify as a watchman, the participle watchman. Now, Justinian's lexicon has some interesting references, but when we go through the scripture, actually, do you want to know how many times this appears in the scripture? The root, natza. The root is has 63 translation counts in the authorized King James Version. So you probably know we're not going to be able to go through all of those in this, and this is for your home study. This is your homework for the serious Rastafari, for the true Rastafari and the Ethiopian Hebrew. This is home study when you're going to really go into this so you can really know for yourself. But just fly over, and this kind of fly over, the meaning to keep, like a vineyard, to look at, to watch over, to defend, to free. All of this is a part of the root word meaning of natsar, where, for example, Psalm 141:3 says, as if keep watch over the door of my lips, my mouth, lest rash words should go forward. So when we see some of these nigger Jews out there cursing us every name, calling us every name besides being a son or a daughter of God, we don't really have time for that. We got to blockade them. You know what I'm saying? Because they're already violating what the scriptures say right here. They're not keeping a watch over the door. They're not keeping a knot over the door of their mouth. So they're not really following truly in the way of Yahoshuwa or YHWH, as they call him. You understand? As they miscall him, because there's a mispronunciation right there. Why do they add a Y at the end of it? There's no Y in the Hebrew. But be that as it may, you can ask them why. But it goes on to deal with to defend, to preserve from dangers as God guarding men, and some scriptural verses, and quote, thou will preserve me from dangers, preserve natsar, preserve me from dangers, thou, or from distress, in Psalm 12:8, 64:2, 140:2, Isaiah 49:6, the preserved from the exile, destruction rather, of Israel, the preserved, the Nazarene. So that's what we get in that Nazarene. The reason why they use the regular Z instead of the sound is because in English there's no sound. There's no sound. If you hear it in English, you might just write down, oh, okay, let's put a Z there. Maybe even double Z, like thunderbolt, double Z. You understand? So the meaning of it is to keep, to preserve, to hide, as to keep, to hide. Now, in a bad sense, God is said to observe anyone as marking his guilt or fault. When Job uses it in Job 7:20, O thou observer of men. So that's the not in the sense of the bad sense. He's looking for fault, or observer of these faults of men. You understand? But to watch, as to watch a city. So the idea is very, very consistent, and we do find it in the prophetical books. And if we were to study through each of the 63 references as it appears in many of the prophetical books, let's just go through this just briefly, quickly. Natsar, it appears in many of the prophetical books. It appears in Isaiah. It appears in Jeremiah. It appears in Ezekiel. It appears in Nahum. Those are prophets, aren't they? Okay, so that root word right there where it says, as it was written in the prophets, not just the prophets we have written down, but also you have to remember that the prophecy was an institution. So you had the chief prophets or great prophets like Isaiah, but you had others who were scribes and others who were disciples of those prophets, and they were known to the people also as the prophets because they kept the prophetical message of the chief and the main prophets alive and well. So the idea about why Christ drank wine in that sense, since he was a Nazarene, is incorrect. The first thing is the words are two different words in the Hebrew. You understand? And when we get to the root, in other words, if we understand the Bible like those who wrote the Bible or originally communicated these biblical ideas, they were from two different root words.